The NDP is celebrating in Esquimalt Saanich Sooke. It's a birthday celebration for a 95-year-old member who has been working for the party on election campaigns since the 1930s.
How are you?
And paying his respects, incumbent Randall Garrison, hoping to celebrate again on election day. But the former justice instructor is taking nothing for granted. He's been here before and knows all too well, despite the perceived orange support, the vote can get away from you.
Well, one successful, two unsuccessful so far, and we won quite narrowly over the Conservatives last time, so I'm hoping we can up that margin and bring up my average to 500.
This is quite a split for a riding here. I mean, it's been Reform, Conservative, Liberal, NDP.
All of those with one MP.
Yeah, I know. You're not planning on crossing the floor.
No, I'm not. It's not a tradition here.
But it's an indication, really, of how diverse this riding is.
It is. It is. It's a very diverse riding. It starts downtown with Esquimalt, with sort of downtown urban vibe, and goes all the way out to Jordan River, where we've got people, you know, in traditional fishing and logging industries. Unfortunately, not too many people working in those traditional industries anymore. So those communities are struggling to find a new base for their economy, and lots of good things going on in ecotourism, but very diverse.
It's a very diverse riding, and it's been redrawn, obviously, since you know, the last election. Is that going to, do you think, give you an edge, or do you think it's going to hinder you a bit, or is it?
I think the good news.
Rethink your campaign. Or?
The good news for people in Vancouver Island is it means we have a 7th seat on the island, so we'll send 7 people to Ottawa. Because there was so much growth in my riding, they had to do something. I was joking with people, I had more people than the 4 MPs from PEI, which was true. So they took away Langford and the Highlands to the new riding, and that'll give some extra representation to them. But it doesn't make a big difference politically in the riding. It's not a big shift.
Well, I wonder, because, I mean, Langford was traditionally, it kind of went Conservative Reform, more of a kind of a blue-collar image, at least, I mean, from the outside. So that may possibly give you a bit of an edge, you think?
Well, when you recast the votes, which Elections Canada did, it's a slight improvement. But I think what it really illustrates is that the fight was very tight all across the old riding, and I think it'll be tight again.
The Esquimalt Saanich Sooke sits on a long stretch of coast on southern Vancouver Island. A mix of urban, rural, and light industry, the riding also hosts CFB Esquimalt, the base of the Maritime Pacific Fleet. Under redistribution, the electoral area keeps most of its voters, but loses more than half of its territory.
Most of southern Vancouver Island in the provincial election has gone completely NDP, except in the last provincial election where the Greens elected their first MLA. And the federal Greens are hoping that vote is going to grow.
Oh, and it's looking like Green is growing here.
The Green candidate working to increase that vote and take the riding is political newcomer Francis Littman, who at nearly every opportunity invokes the spirit of the Green Party leader.
I've entered politics because of this lady, Elizabeth May.
Are you familiar with Elizabeth May?
By moving to the 21st century, job plan of green, renewable, clean tech, we can have carpenters, armies of carpenters and tradespeople helping us have energy democracy.
Why the Green Party? What is it about the Greens that attracted you?
Well, I've had a long history of working in areas that are community based, working with NGOs. I put together a Creatively United for the Planet. Not certain if you're aware of that, but it's considered one of Canada's best and largest Earth Week festivals. And that brought me in touch with a lot of the local concerns and issues that were going on, and it seemed to me that the Green Party was the only party that was really had the environment on the agenda, although I know it's more than a one-issue party.
So if it's more than a one-issue party, and I guess the criticism has always been, or the suggestion has always been, the Greens own the environment issue, so why keep pushing that? So how do you feel about that? I mean, are you comfortable with their other policies? Or?
Absolutely. I really am delighted with the fact that the Greens put people and planet first. And I think that they work very well together. The Greens recognize that you can have a healthy economy with a healthy environment, obviously. The two go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. And it seems that we've been going on for way too long, Stephen, where thinking that we can just keep doing this resource extraction and living our lives the way we are. And it's not going to ever hamper our ability to enjoy these beautiful surroundings that are around us.
So how does the environment then, Frances, play into the writing of the Esquimalt Saanich Sooke? Is it, I mean, are we extracting a lot of the resources from?
Well, we're not extracting them from here yet, but the talk about LNG could be one of those areas where extraction does occur. But what we would see are tankers off our coast, and that concerns me greatly as someone who loves this island, have lived here my entire life. The last thing I want to see is increased tanker traffic or the risk of an oil spill off these beautiful waters.
Liberal David Murner is a former federal government and now BC provincial government lawyer. He acknowledges when it comes to the Greens, he's running against two candidates.
In these more populated areas, one of the challenges we have on the east side of the riding is that that used to be part of Elizabeth May's riding. And so some people still think they're in Elizabeth May's riding. So we have quite a bit of Green support in here, which we think we can convert to the Liberals. Once they know that Elizabeth May isn't running here, and we're knocking on their doors, and we'll knock on their doors 2 or 3 times, because we think this part of the riding should come to us.
You know, I mentioned this to other candidates. I mean, Elizabeth May isn't running in this riding, but I mean, if you look at the posters, you'd think she was.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, her posters are everywhere. And they have great lawn signs, but especially great big signs with Elizabeth May with the other candidates, right? Because Elizabeth is a big draw. But once people find out that she's not in this part of the riding anymore, and that they have a chance to come to the Liberals, I think we have a shot. A lot will depend on Justin's performance. If he takes off, I think we can win that east side of the riding.
You talk about that. I mean, Justin Trudeau made an appearance here in a Esquimalt Saanich Sooke. Was that because this is one that you really think you can win?
Yes, it is. It's exactly. He doesn't show up at any riding just like that. This is part of a plan. We really think we can win this riding.
What makes you think that, David? I mean, this has been a riding that has been Reform, Conservative, Liberal. As someone's pointed out, all under one candidate. It's now gone to the NDP. They generally have a pretty strong showing in this area of Greater Victoria. What makes you think you can turn it Liberal?
Part of it is about Justin, frankly. People are excited by Justin. We have a whole bunch of UVic, University of Victoria volunteers. Young people are coming out to work for us in ways. I've been involved in the South Island for 10 years, and we've never seen this much youth engagement, so that helps us. We have a lot of phoners and door knockers who are young, and that's changing the game for us. Much more volunteer engagement. Secondly, we think there are going to be some very good vote splits here. The Greens are strong, the NDP is strong, and we think we're strong. And so that means you need 35, 40% of the vote, and you're in. So if we can get basically the magic number in our riding is 26,000 votes. If we can get 26,000 votes, we can get in. That means if we can knock on 75% of the doors or 100% of the doors and then phone the rest, so we cover the whole riding off, there's a shot.
And Murner and the Liberals are speeding up their campaign to do exactly that, one voter at a time.
So we're sort of aiming for families a lot in our campaign. And we're also going to do an income tax cut for 9 out of 10 Canadians. That's another big part of the campaign. Any questions or concerns or issues? No? Appreciate your time. October 19th is Election Day, right? So nice to see you. Thank you for your time.
Former Colwood councillor Sherry Lukens also knows the ground game at the door is important if she is to reclaim the riding for the Conservatives.
Probably appropriate we're on the beach here on southern Vancouver Island in this riding. You know these beaches well. We've got the base, Esquimalt, CFB Esquimalt there, Maritime Pacific. And right here in Colwood, you were a councillor where you first got into politics.
Yes, absolutely. And it was my first foray into politics ever. I had sat on the Planning and Land Use Committee in 2010 that I was appointed to by then Mayor Dave Saunders. And it was thereafter, the following year, that just the transparency, lack of accountability, lack of can-do attitude, being able to move things forward, that was the driver for me of getting involved in municipal politics. So it was 3 great years, very successful years.
And during that time you worked for TELUS, right?
I worked for TELUS only up until 2009.
Okay, and what were you doing for them?
I had 11 years with TELUS, starting out working with sales teams, so inside sales, and then I moved into marketing, process management, project management. In the last 5 years, I was on Vancouver Island, and was working with developers and builders up and down Vancouver Island to ensure they pre-wired for new technologies such as TELUS TV. So it was an amazing career and a great support team for sure.
So you've done a bit of a swing because you actually started off wanting to be a professional figure skater.
Yes.
Did pretty well at that.
Thank you, yes. I actually born and raised on a farm in Alberta. My mom and dad were grain farmers. My dad was also a crop duster, but by the age of 9 I was leaving home for competitive figure skating, which I traveled quite extensively with. Did that for about 30 years, both competitively and professionally. Transitioned into broadcasting, actually, working the last few years with CTV News. And then I met my husband actually on a blind date. I was living in Saskatoon at the time, moved back to the West Coast where he was living. Wasn't sure what I was going to do, and got a phone call. And a few months later, I was working at TELUS, and hence the 11-year career thereafter. And it was in 2005 when my husband and I moved from Vancouver Island, or from Vancouver to Vancouver Island, where he was from. And he had retired from the RCMP as the inspector in charge of the Air Services Division. And we were avid sports fishermen. So being that he was from the island, it only made sense to come home, where we spent a good part of our time. Unfortunately, 18 months later, he was killed in a helicopter crash. And so I stayed up in the Cowichan Valley area where we had 4 acres, and in 2009 I made the move south to Colwood, where I later became a Colwood City Councillor.
A recent Insight poll shows the Conservatives are gaining support. The NDP is dropping, but still leading. Randall Garrison believes his performance as MP will help return him to Ottawa.
I feel like personally there's some unfinished business. I was the NDP spokesperson on C-51. I want to go back and make sure that that bill is repealed. We don't need surveillance of the entire population here. We need the police to have resources to focus on the real threats. I had my private member's bill, C-279, that I got through the House of Commons with 18 Conservatives voting for it, only to have the Prime Minister use the Senate to kill my bill. So I'd like to go back and work on that again.
And for those that are watching, that bill was?
That was a bill to provide the same rights and protections the rest of us have for those who are transgender or gender variant. Lots of very big problems for what's a small segment of our population, but probably the most discriminated against, and those who have the most difficulties in public life.
That's an important issue. I mean, obviously, you're in a same-sex relationship.
That's right. 15 years.
15 years is a long time for anybody these days, right?
It is.
Talk a little bit about that, because, I mean, there was a time, obviously, when anybody being openly out may hurt their political career. Obviously, it's not hurt yours. But is there a bit of a difference, you think?
Well, I am proud to be one of only 4 openly gay men who have ever been elected to the House of Commons. And what it represents is the diversity that the NDP provides in the House of Commons. You know, we have a caucus of 40% women. We have 5 LGBT representatives. We have the most visible minorities. We have the most people with disabilities. And that same thing is true again in this campaign with candidates. 44% of our candidates are women. We've got 10 LGBT people running with good prospects of being elected. And I think public policy improves when you have a diversity of representation. When we take more voices in, we get better output.
So obviously when Kathleen Wynne in Ontario, the Premier, won, she talked a bit about that, about the fact that it never became an issue. Has it ever become an issue for you?
The first time I ran, there was an attempt by some people in the community to use it against me, but it was a bit hard for them to do because I'd been an out police board member, an out city councillor. Didn't have anything to hide. So it didn't really work very well. And in fact, we joked in the first campaign that they had missed a few households in notifying that I was gay, and would they go back out and tell people, because we got a lot of volunteers who had gotten the negative message saying, I'm not gay, but I don't think that should have anything to do with the campaign. So apart from that first campaign, not really come up. There's, you know, policy issues people disagree on. There's a few people who disagree, but not really an issue.
Talk about the commitment for being an MP. I've been talking to candidates saying, do you really realize what you're going to be in for? I mean, you obviously definitely wanted to go to Ottawa, otherwise you wouldn't have made as many attempts as you did to get there.
Right.
When you got there, you and I have spoken in the past about the commitment and the stress on personal life.
It is.
Talk a bit about that.
Well, being from Vancouver Island, the distance is a big factor that no one else really takes into account in the House of Commons. So assignments are done equally in the various parties, and I always say, yeah, equally plus my 18 hours of travel every week. So I come home every weekend. My partner lives here. We live in the riding. I don't live in Ottawa. And that takes a toll in terms of travel. But that's the only downside that I find to the job, is that just being away from home and the constant travel.
Talk a little bit about the culture in Ottawa. Is it what you expected, or have you been surprised?
Well, I think having served on the municipal council, I come from that school where you have to accommodate people with different views. You have to work with them to get things done. And there are some people in all parties you can do that with. And there are some people, frankly, in the Liberal and Conservative Party that you can't do that with. Very difficult to work with. So I put those skills to work, as I said, on my private members bill on gender identity, and got 2/3 of the Liberal caucus and 18 of the Conservatives to go with me. And so I guess I don't give up on that. I know that the overwhelming feeling is, well, there's the nastiness and the lack of cooperation, but you can push through that if you really work at it.
Garrison, like his Green challenger, is pushing his strength on environmental issues.
How can you, as a Liberal, when you've got the NDP and the Greens really promoting strong environmental policies, here you are, a lawyer, convince people that you're for the environment? I mean, what are you going to do to change that perception?
There are a couple of things. One is in my volunteer activities. I've been doing a lot that relates to the environment. I've been on the board of the Land Conservancy, out in the Sooke Hills pulling broom. The other thing is that within the Liberal Party itself, we've had a really big push from British Columbia on green issues. We campaigned inside the party on the carbon tax. It became policy. Stéphane Dion ran on the issue, right? So inside the party, we've managed to move environmental issues right to the top of the agenda. And so we've been effective. And as somebody who knows the Liberal Party, I've been involved 30 years, I've been on the national board, I know how to move that party. And I hope if I could get into caucus, I could be a voice for the environment in caucus. And there are lots of allies, Stéphane Dion, Joyce Murray, David McGuinty. There's a strong Green caucus inside the Liberal Party. And I think coming from the West Coast would add to that.
Is it known, do you think, David? Or is this something you're just going to have to educate voters to?
Education is a huge issue. A lot of voters are going into this campaign not really sure what the major issues are. It's one of the reasons we're so hard on the doors, because people, we had somebody yesterday saying to us, I really don't know what's happening. And there's 5 weeks left. It's understandable, but a big part of what a candidate needs to do, I think, is to get on the doorstep and talk to people about this is how it works, these are the issues. And green issues on the South Island are critical, and the Liberal elected from the South Island could have a big impact. Historically, we brought in the Northern Tanker Ban, right? David Anderson was the MP here in this very riding, and he fought for green issues. He's known as a green champion. He's a Liberal. So we have things to build on. We really do have a background, a history to build on in this province.
What's happened to the Liberal Party, though, here in the South Island? I mean, I've been covering it for many years.
Yeah.
It doesn't appear to be as strong as it used to be, at least the infrastructure, the riding associations.
Yeah. We've had some really tough competition. I think the Greens have really cut into our vote a lot. I have friends, neighbors actually, who have left the federal Liberals to join the Greens, and a key part of this campaign is bringing them back and saying, look, we have a real opportunity to form government. The Greens, Elizabeth May would tell you herself, we don't have a hope of forming government. The Liberals do. And so what we need to do is bring back those red-green Liberals, right, into our campaigns. And it's happening, especially the young Liberals are really green, and they really care about these issues.
So the people that are kind of at the eastern part of Canada and in central, Ontario, that region there, they may not fully understand or grasp the significance of Greens.
Yeah.
And on the West Coast here, it is completely different than there, right?
It's a big issue. You need to have a bit of a track record, like I do in volunteering and on the issues as well. To win this seat, to win South Vancouver Island seats, you need to have a green record and a very strong green policy. And I think it's affecting national policy. In fact, I know it's affecting national policy. We're really strongly against Northern Gateway. Justin came out last week on Kinder Morgan saying it doesn't make sense. So a lot of these pipeline issues and tanker issues we're focusing on in this campaign.
To be honest, I wouldn't have considered you before, but because you've come to my house, I will definitely read up and see what you're all about, for sure.
Appreciate it. Any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We'd be more than happy to talk.
Awesome.
But the Conservative candidate says the environment is not the #1 issue she is hearing at the door.
What I'm hearing at the door primarily is about the economy. And people are wanting to ensure that they've got stability. They're wanting to ensure that they have somebody and a leader that can do the job and that they can have confidence in. And my belief is that's Stephen Harper and the Conservatives, and I look forward to being part of that team.
What's unique about Sherry Lukens? What can you bring to the table that perhaps your opponents can't, or vice versa, I guess?
The tenacity and determination to get things done in this riding for the greater majority of the people. Sit down, have the conversations with the constituents in the riding, prioritize what the issues are, and take that voice to the decision-making table in Ottawa, something that we have never had before, and have that conversation and come home and do the follow-up with constituents. We've never had the opportunity to sit down and discuss what the issues are in this riding and identify what's important and then have a voice at the table.
Even under the former Reform Party, when they had the riding, you don't think that was the case?
It wasn't a majority government.
So a majority government would give more power to your voice here in Esquimalt, Saanich, Sooke?
I think being able to be a voice at a table that has a majority government is what I'm speaking. Regardless of whether it's a majority or a minority, the reality is we need to work together. And I think the real opportunity in this election is no matter what, almost 50 MPs from all of the parties is retiring or are retiring. And we have 38 brand new ridings. So of the 338 people that are going to be elected this time, almost 1/3 of them will be brand new. So the opportunity is new energy, new ideas, and new ways of doing business. And for that, I'm very excited.
Does that also mean then when you say new ideas for the Conservative Party listening? Because there is a perception that the Conservative Party doesn't listen.
Well, I haven't been there, so, you know, you only hear when you talk to people. I mean, perception is reality, I understand that. But I am open, and I am looking forward to being a voice and a contributing voice for Esquimalt, Saanich, Sooke.
And you do that by holding town meetings, or how do you do that?
Well, getting the ideas, understanding what's important to the people or the constituents in the riding, absolutely. I mean, talking to people, meeting people, you know, I mean, the more people I meet and the more diversified groups I can meet and have the conversations, then we can identify and prioritize. Those are the issues that I will be taking to Ottawa.
Do you feel that politics, federal politics at least, is becoming more partisan on a daily basis?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends what the issues are. I mean, we saw when the shootings happened on Parliament Hill that we can all come together for the right reasons, right? But I do know that there's very distinct lines as to what is right for one party may not be right for another party, and based on their belief system. So it depends what the issues are, absolutely.
One of the issues that come up when we're talking with voters and other candidates have raised it is Bill C-51. Mm-hmm. What's your take on that?
I think it's been, personally, it's been taken out of context in with many respects when I do talk to people. I know I can personalize this. My late husband, who was a retired inspector with the RCMP in charge of the Air Services Division, he worked on the Clifford Olson case. And it traumatized him to think that these little boys were killed. And the fact that the different agencies are now going to be able to share information that they couldn't do before, in the long run might have saved many of those lives. That's what's important.
Do you know anything about the Green Party? I'm the candidate, actually.
Frances Lippman is dead set against Bill C-51 and says she will work with her party to defeat it. And if elected, she promises to leave her career behind as a professional photographer.
Tell me about what does it mean to you? I mean, this is your art. This is what you live for. Explain to me your emotional connection to this.
Well, there's a huge emotional connection because I grew up not having a family. I lost my family very young. I was adopted, and unfortunately the family I was adopted into had a lot of health issues, and so by the time I was 17 I was living on my own. And what I realized is I never had any photographs of my own family. I had one. Just one, but that was it. And just a tiny little picture of my entire family. And it was when I was very young. So when I decided to become a photographer, I was determined to make sure that people had memories that they could look back on and really treasure for many, many years in their lives.
You get quite emotional when you're talking about this.
Yes, it's huge. I mean, family is so important, and it's something that has been lacking from my life. But I feel a really deep connection to a lot of people. Like, I feel like the world is my family, and I feel that I'm of service to making the world a better place, and this is the one way I've been doing it up until now.
You're surrounded by lots of pictures of families.
I am. It's where I do my business, and people like to see what I do. And I don't, after a while, I don't notice that it's really here because I spend so much time here. But it feels very comforting to me. Although, I think as moving on, I would like to see, I would like to just have a lot of paintings and move away from having photos of other people's families on my wall.
Let's talk a bit about what you're seeing at the door, what photos are telling you. What do you think the biggest issue is?
Well, it's the heave-Steve. ABC, anything but Harper. I mean, we hear that just constantly. There's a lot of fear around, the current administration remaining and getting back in again. So people are really anxious for a change, and they are concerned about items like, or things like vote splitting, which we have to tell them is not an issue in this riding, and bring people up to speed, because a lot of people don't seem to understand how the whole system is working. They just have one-track mind right now.
You say vote splitting is not an issue in this riding. What do you mean by that? I mean, certainly there was a strong Green presence in the riding next door in the by-election, but here the Greens really haven't shown a lot of strength federally.
Well, this is a really different election than 2011. Absolutely. We've got candidates running from coast to coast, and the Greens are really bringing out the vote. Like Elizabeth, unseated a Tory cabinet minister. She had over 72% of the vote. Provincially, Andrew Weaver really wowed everybody in Oak Bay, Victoria, with over 80% of the vote. And just recently, I know that's not here, but Prince Edward Island had record voter turnout for Peter Bevan Baker, who was running for the Greens, and he unseated another Tory cabinet minister. So we're growing the vote. And what we're really seeing is this is a swing riding, not a split vote.
In a strange twist of fate, Littman is also connected to the NDP and Conservative candidates. Before deciding to run, she took the promo shots for Sherry Lukens and Randall Garrison. The focus for the NDP candidate is making sure that Lukens and the Conservatives are not in the picture.
Who's your fiercest challenger in this riding?
Well, I believe it's the Conservatives, as it always has been. And even some local pollsters have been saying that they feel like maybe they ought to add a few points onto the Conservatives, because people just aren't saying publicly or to pollsters that they're still backing the Conservatives. So I think that strength will still be there. They've got a lot of money left to spend in this campaign. That's the reason they lengthened the campaign. But on the other side, we got a lot of doors to knock on. So we'll try to even that out with our volunteers and my own efforts at the doorstep.
For now, judging from the voters we spoke to, Garrison's approach appears to be working.
Well, I'm going to vote the NDP.
Who I'm going to vote for is going to depend on which party abandons C-51 security bill. So whatever party seems the most promising, that's the issue.
But many in the riding are still making up their minds, as the number of undecided voters sits around 25%. It's why the candidates are moving as quickly as they can. They know, even with the NDP lead, Esquimalt Saanich Sooke is still in play.